indeed, this is the tough question right now. I think it's kind of complicated for mainly for European societies right now, and we are aware that our lives are gonna change in the future, and indeed they have already changed. But I think we are still on a step of shock, just realizing what's going on, how things are going to evolve in the future. So we don't really know right now how things are going to be. We are just imagining. And indeed, well, for us, we are still, we have already changed our face-to-face teaching or lecturing for this digital or online one. So indeed, I think we are lucky sectors of society because, well, we are able until this point to keep our jobs and to continue working, in this case, online. So, well, taking into account the overall situation, which is dramatic and complicated for population, for people who have lost their relatives and so on. But for us, we cannot complain that we are doing kind of well within this kind of pandemic situation.
You are a professor of journalism at Carlos III Madrid, though your work is mainly focused on international relations, law, European communication. You also have a double degree on journalism and international and political European politics. Is it important for journalists to have a degree in the field they are specialized on?
Well, indeed, this is a discussion we have already had several times at Spanish level, but at European level as well. So indeed, journalists, for example, is not a degree in some countries such as France, for example. And so here we have the discussion if journalism has in itself the entity to become into a degree, or if studies in journalism should be complementary to studies in some other fields, such as law, politics, administration, management, economics, whatsoever. And indeed, it's kind of tough and difficult to solve this kind of situation because, for example, some professors on journalism, just with just one single degree, they would defend their side, and they would say, no, journalism is an entity in itself, and it's enough. For the other ones, me included, I would say, okay, journalism is fine, but journalism should be added or accompanied by something else. Because it's true that journalism or communication is giving you the format, is giving you the way to tell stories, but the problem is, if you don't have anything to tell, so what's gonna be? What will you do? So I think for me it's needed to have something else that may accompany journalism or communication.
Is it challenging to be a communicator nowadays?
Well, I think nowadays, yes, for sure, it's really challenging in the aftermath of the COVID-19 or the coronavirus. Indeed. We realized how important communication might be in this kind of crisis management done by national entities, so governments, but by subnational entities or supranational entities such as the European Union. For example, if we realize the Council or the European Council we had last week not Brussels, because right now this is telematic. Due to the situation, we realized, okay, they didn't reach an agreement, or at the end, the agreement they reached was not the agreement some of the countries wanted to reach. So how do you communicate this? To what extent is going to be easy to communicate policies when policies are not joined enough? Mm-hmm. Well, this is so indeed for sure it's challenging period for political communication indeed.
Talking about professionalism, we see in the media today on trusted sources of information, from misleading headlines to stories telling the half truth or actual fake news. It is because of the need of sensationalism or the unprofessionalism of some journalists.
Well, indeed, I think you are right. It's sensationalism, it's lack of professionalism, but I wouldn't say those are the two main reasons that may explain the spread and the dissemination of disinformation or fake news. It has been tested by different research that the two main reasons that may encourage disinformation are political and economical. So on the first side, the economical ones, you know, all these kind of theories or techniques of the clickbait. So indeed, you overpromise in the headline, and then the content of the story is not as promising as it was in the headline. So, but you have already clicked, and some of the media they get funded due to the number of clicks. So this is the economic part. And indeed, I don't know, for example, dealing with the American elections 2016, there were discovered many pro-Trump booths from countries such as Macedonia, for example. It was stated that Macedonia was the most pro-Trump supporter. And indeed, some of those people in Macedonia were interviewed, and they said, okay, here we are unemployed, but due to this model or this system, we are earning such quantities of money just creating this information. We do this due to economic reasons. So this might be the first option. And the second one, which might be the first one in terms of importance, is the political or the ideological one. You know, within democratic models or democratic processes, if you are able to disseminate this information, those doses of this information may be able to encourage the distrust of population on democratic processes, institutions, whatsoever. So indeed, that's why there have been proof attempts from third countries to interrupt domestic or internal democratic processes in some countries. And here we have the two main reasons why this information is spread nowadays.
How is the European Commission, for example, how is it dealing with continuous misinformation, with propaganda?
Well, indeed, it's kind of tough story, because indeed it's, I have already finished one, it's going to be published in some months, one essay, one book about disinformation, and there's one chapter dealing with this, but just to make it short, let's say that they realized after the result of the referendum of the Brexit in 2016 that this information was much more dangerous than expected, or that this information could affect the democratic processes or the elections or the referendums in some countries much more than they expected. They thought that with the Brexit referendum in 3 weeks, just pushing a bit David Cameron's government in the UK, they could reverse years and years, decade of disinformation and the so-called Euro myths, or those kind of attributions, completely fake attributions towards the European Union spread by some political parties and media in the UK, such as those that you know really sensationalists, such as The Sun, or all those ones. Indeed, then they realized and they said, okay, jointly with the growing of the populists in the elections of 2014, they stated, if we don't try to confront this situation, we are going to have really, really bad results in the 2019 elections of the European Parliament last year. So that's why from year 17 and 18, they started to rise some kind of solutions in order to try to avoid this dissemination of disinformation. So that's why they created the so-called it was the group of experts against disinformation in 18. They had kind of communication about this. That communication was to some extent used by the European Commission for the first communication on disinformation. This went afterwards to the Parliament. There is a code of good practices on disinformation. They have tried to negotiate with the big platforms, such as Google, Facebook, whatsoever, in order to get them involved in this fight. And it seems that afterwards they had been able to contain for a while this dissemination of disinformation within the context of the last European elections. But it's a bit longer. I just try to sort it.
Well, how can we personally educate the audience regarding fake news? Because fake news is shared, most of it by word of mouth on the social media platforms.
Yes, this is such a big problem, because it's true that social media, social networks, they have some kind of responsibilities. Platforms, for sure, those people or those countries interested in disseminating this information. And well, we may have national governments or supranational governments, such as the European Union, trying to confront this information. But at the end, the responsibility is the citizen responsibility. It's the citizen responsibility on sharing this information, on sharing kind of information that are not completely verified. And this is a problem, because it has been analyzed that we citizens, we follow the so-called pattern of the confirmation bias. So indeed, if we realize or we find out something that seems to confirm our previous ideology, our previous understanding of the situation, we just try to spread this without even confirming if this is verified or not. So indeed, it's a problem, a really big problem, the responsibility of the citizen. It's one small detail I would like to add is the issue that right now the most dangerous disinformation is the one that is released through personal social media. At this moment, WhatsApp. WhatsApp is the most dangerous one. Why? Because first of all, messages in WhatsApp are encrypted, so might not be open, so cannot be verified by fact checkers or whatsoever, as blogs or fake media on internet. But the main problem is as well due to the fact that you receive WhatsApp by your mates, by your colleagues, by your peers, and it's people you trust in. So that's the how dangerous is disinformation through social networks, is because you are receiving that disinformation from your peers, people you try to tend to trust to. And indeed, well, that's why at this moment is the core of the disinformation fight against. So, since let's say 10 years ago, we came to a new era of communication with the ascent of technologies of information and communication. Right now, we have much more access to information, but the problem is we don't have time enough to discriminate which information is accurate and true, and which one is not accurate and is fake. So that's a big problem right now. Before we have the intermediation of journalists, but right now journalists are not needed anymore, because you can create your own blog and start spreading this information in half an hour just for doing this. So indeed, this is complicated for older generations that had been much more used to trust on the information they received, because it was a mediated information through specialists, through journalists. So right now, I'm very sorry, but we need to start losing the truth into the most of the information we receive, and at least being skeptical enough just on the information we receive. And it's kind of let's say normal or usual. If it's strange, if it's so nice, if it's so confirming your own, please just be skeptical. Try to verify, look for the who signs the story, what is said in the internet about the people who sign, what's the media, it's an official institution whatsoever, because otherwise you could get completely misinformed.
We also see a lot of pressure on the media. Journalists in some countries are facing censorship, intimidation. What are your thoughts on this issue? We see professionals willing to fight for their rights and mission, but most of the time they aren't let to get out the truth.
Well, this is such a complicated situation in some countries. You know, freedom of speech is well assured in some countries all over the world, but not in other ones. For example, right now, being a journalist in Mexico is, I think, is much more dangerous than being a doctor in Europe right now. So indeed, this is very complicated, and indeed, it's kind of you cannot confront the whole system by yourself alone. You need the support of the institutions and the support of the governments. Otherwise, doing this one person or some people alone is not going to be productive, and you could have many problems. And I'm afraid I have no recipe to cope with this, because I would say be brave, but I cannot tell you be brave when you might be risking your life in one given country. So I'm not entitled to do this.
Is it easy to buy a journalist nowadays?
Is it, sorry?
Easy to buy a journalist nowadays?
It's easy to buy a journalist nowadays. I think it's not complicated. Cause, well, it's not complicated. I don't know to what extent journalists might be bought or might be sold. But it's true that since in some countries they don't get as much recognition as they deserve, and the recognition is not only a moral or ethical recognition, but might be an economical recognition as well. You know, they are gonna be easier to be bought if they could receive a good payment for their work. Maybe it could be much more difficult to buy them. Nevertheless, it's also true that there are many ethical and moral journalists all over the world that they just refuse to be bought, even if accepting could facilitate their lives very much. But to my understanding, in some countries, yes, this might not be very difficult.
These days, with the pandemic going on, there are people struggling with mental health because of the negativity they see in the mass media. How can we keep being informed without losing our sanity?
It's kind of complicated. It's kind of complicated right now, because the main problem is that this pandemic crisis, that has been completely unexpected, because 3 months ago when we started the New Year's Eve, we didn't expect that 2020 was going to be like this, has changed that much our lives. And in that sense, has changed that much our lives that we cannot mostly do what we did before. Indeed, right now we are in our houses, in our apartments, whatsoever. We cannot even leave our apartments except for going to the supermarket. And this has changed that much our lives, and it's so novelty and it's so unexpected that it's a huge informative weapon, a huge informative issue. So I don't think this is going to be solved in a while. And we would say the main problem is right now, this is as important, that this has affected that much our ways of entertainment as well. You know, for example, I think you come from Romania, but you study in the UK, if I remember well. But here in Spain and in the UK as well, and I think in Romania should be close similar. It was always said that the sport, the football, it was the opium of the citizens. You know, when you wanted to forget about your distress or things in your life that you dislike whatsoever, well, that was that kind of opium you had. The main problem is right now we don't have any opium, because we cannot go to the theater. Well, yes, we have Netflix and all those audiovisual options, but we are really far away from many common ways of entertainment we have had until 2 months ago or 1 month ago. So indeed, that's why it's so difficult for us to leave this circle of COVID-19.